Hello there guys, Bullerbo10000 here, bringing you my discussion and analysis of the Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield reveal trailer, including a detailed look at all the different locations and some theories I'm gonna throw at you guys regarding what we could expect from the game. And boy am I super excited for this one. Pokemon Sword and Shield are based in the Galar region, and if you couldn't tell already, the region is based on the United Kingdom, which means I must be extremely patriotic about this generation and love it with all of my heart, regardless of whether it ends up great or terrible. Such is the pain of being British. So let's get into this. We start off this trailer with a look at Route 1, which we can see based on this sign that has the numbers 01. Beyond the beautiful mossy cobbled fences, we can see a rural town that looks to be the starting town on the player's journey, as if we cross this location over with the large Galar region map we're shown later in the direct, you can clearly see this town below, along with two houses to the south, which we'll see in a moment. You can also see a Pokemon Center, as well as two buildings that look like they could be shops of some kind. Perhaps character customization has returned? There's also an overturned wheelbarrow on the side of the road, and you can see small patches of grass where wild Pokemon can be found. There's also a train station, which makes me wonder if catching trains is going to be the main way to get around the Galar region. Looking at the region map, there are many railways that all seem to lead to this industrial-looking town in the center of the region, but more on that later. Next up, we see a weather vane shaped like a fletchling with a windmill in the background. This is either the house of the player, rival, or perhaps even the professor of the region, though personally I think it's the house of the rival, as we can see it here on the region map and it's seemingly located next to the house we'll see in a few moments later in the trailer. Next up, we travel to a completely different location with lush yellow fields of wheat, which might be a location where Pokemon can be encountered. To the very left of the screen, you can also see a stone arch that resembles Stonehenge, a classic British tourist attraction, and throughout this shot there are various stones jutting up around the countryside. But what most players will find interesting is the massive stadium at the center of the town, with the logo of grass on it. Could this be the design for gyms in this game? If we take a look at the region map, this town is much further along north of the steampunk-looking city. However, I do think this could be one of the first gyms, if not the first, we encounter in-game. Looking at the region map, there are no real towns between the starting location and the massive city we see in the trailer, so chances are we'll either be taking a train to the main city, where we can then exit through this mountainous area, which will take us to the grass gym via this cave, or we could take the train to this station below these wetlands and approach the large city on foot, then taking the cave destination to get to Stonehenge. The next shot is of a home that I believe the player will inhabit. Being on the region map at the bottom left, it's quite a traditional home that looks ripped out of Golden Sun with its straw roofing and quaint feel. We then cut to a shot of our player character suiting up for their journey with a large square backpack. There's a Pokeball symbol on the wall as a poster, the character has a very nice looking TV, and he's got a radiator in his bedroom, lucky guy. We then cut to a headshot at... Wait, is that a grey beanie? I'm just so emotional right now. Sword and Shield accepts beanies? I don't know what else to say. This is all I could have ever wanted. I love my beanies so much, and to see such representation in video game media for grey beanies, I'm actually stunned beyond words. We have been fighting for beanie rights for so long, and this is just such a wonderful step forwards. I am so proud of all you beanie wearers out there. Join me, Beanie Squad. Absolutely beautiful. We then get a frontal view of our male character looking ready to take on the British elements, and right as the game shifts to a new shot, we can see a Pikachu plushie and a Nintendo Switch on the guy's dresser, as well as a poster that we can't really make out, and a purple clock-like object on the wall that doesn't look very functional, I have to say. Upon switching, we get a look at our female protagonist looking absolutely adorable, standing outside her home. And it's worth noting, both protagonists seem to have some green checkered fabric on their base designs. We then see the player walking down the steps of their home, while also seeing the town from the beginning of the trailer in the distance. But what's most interesting is the large Pokeball on the side of this purple-roofed building. Could this mean that this is the professor's countryside home? We then get a shot of the lake just past the first town, where we can see a somewhat overgrown house with a battlefield outside. There's also a little house in the distance, though it doesn't seem like there's an obvious path over there, and it doesn't show up on the region map, so it's probably just set dressing. There's also a bench overlooking the lake, which makes me hope that we can sit on benches in this game, and we see multiple benches throughout the trailer, so I think that is a given. Next up, we get a shot of a misty forest that's obscured by fog. Now, I'm not entirely sure for certain where this location could be, but my best guess is that it's the forest next to the starting player's house. If you look at the region map, you'll see a path veering into the forest from the player's home, that's seemingly obscured by fog in the picture. Could this be where we find our first Pokemon, seeing as it's so close to home? We then get a shot of the massive city of bricks in the center of the region, and as many people have pointed out, this city is a lovely play on Manchester, and if you've ever seen the show Coronation Street, then the tram, the cobbles, the bricks, it all makes complete sense. This feels like the major hub of the early game, as there are train lines going to and from the city, plus it's smack in the center of the region. I imagine there might be a gym here we can't see on the map, that we can't access until we've beaten a few other gyms first, sort of like Lumio City from Generation 6. Either way, this will probably be the first main city you come across in-game. Our next shot takes us back to Stonehenge Town, where our trainer character is approaching the grass stadium, passing by a large stone marker with mysterious markings on its side. Could these markings mean something, perhaps? As we get closer to the stadium, we also see some words on the door that appear later on in the trailer, but end up just being nonsense words and can't be deciphered. We then get a shot of the Manchester City where the player is crossing a bridge after leaving a rather important looking building to the left. Could that potentially be the Professor's lab? This theory is further supported by a later cinematic of the 3 starter Pokemon appearing in a grassy location in this city, and the starter Pokemon are generally given out by the Professor. We also see a lovely ad for Pokemon food on a sign, which is adorable. The game then switches to an icy location, which is far more northern than the places we've seen so far. In the bottom left, we see a patch of what seems like sand, which leads me to believe this shot takes place in this location of the region in the northeast. We then cut back to the house by the lake, which must belong to some form of major character, given there's a training field out front, and it's occupied if the farms are any indication. Could the Professor have a city lab and a rural retreat, or is this another character's home? We then cut to Route 1, where the player is exploring the grass for Pokemon to discover. The path seemingly curves around in a small bend, and the windmill we saw in an earlier shot should be just off the screen. Can we approach the windmill, perhaps? But what I find most interesting about this shot is that our main character is sneaking through the grass. I never played Sun and Moon, so I don't know if this was a feature added then, but sneaking through the grass seems like a pretty exciting prospect. Perhaps it lowers the chance of encountering a Pokemon, or allows you to discover a Pokemon of a rarer type? Perhaps the most exciting part of this trailer happens next, though, as we head into a wild battle with a Pikachu right on Route 1. That's right, if this trailer is to be believed, we can capture a Pikachu for our party straight away. This also confirms that this region won't be going the black and white route, and will intersperse new and old Pokemon together. The player then releases a Minccino, implying that the player can capture a Minccino early in the game as well, given they're still on Route 1 when they encounter this Pikachu. Could the Minccino be encountered in the foggy forest behind the player's house, or is it another Pokemon that can be found on Route 1? We then cut to the male player character, who throws a Pokeball in an icy location surrounded by rocks and water, with a large signpost right behind him. This area matches the location of the last icy scene, confirming this indeed takes place in the icy region to the north of the region. The player catches a Wishy-Washy, and you can see sunbeds and umbrella set up across the water as well. And I find this extra detail hilarious, as given the cold setting, it implies that whoever is out at the beach is not bothered by the cold, which is ever so British of them. The next shot is of a Pokeball that lands on the ground in a different icy location, and I don't really think I can narrow this one down. There's trees around, and clearly there's no water, so it could really take place in any of the icy locations in the map where there are also trees as well. Now, this brief footage of the Pokeball falling down does scare me a bit, as there's no shadow underneath the Pokeball. It's a minor detail that I'm hoping is just an issue due to the game not being finished, and hopefully it will be ironed out prior to launch. We then get a shot of a Pokeball in the misty forest area from before, then in the wheat fields by Stonehenge Town, showing those fields are in fact wild Pokemon spots. We then get our first appearance of a Pokemon trainer, working similarly to their Generation 7 counterparts. With this Pokemon trainer, you have the option to skip by her by using the grass, which is a nice touch. She's placed near the Lake Mansion, though based on the look of the route on the map, she probably won't be the first trainer on that route which you encounter, instead being right at the end of the route just before the river. There's enough space where you could probably expect 1 or 2 other fights. We get a good look at the opening battle sequence with the player and foe looking at each other dramatically while the wind brushes their hair like they're in a movie, before the foe chucks their Pokeball. We then cut to an entirely different trainer, a youngster or school kid potentially, who is using a Grubbin. Now, on the left you can see a large mountain, and the environment is different from the area near the first town. I believe this is set on the mountain path left of the Manchester City, near the cave that will take the player to Stonehenge, as the terrain and trees match the location perfectly. We then cut to a Hoot Hoot looking pretty angry, fighting on a large bridge-like structure. I am less certain of where this could be, but here are a few locations in the region that I think it might be. We then see Azuelius fighting in an area similar to that of the ice sequence where we saw the Pokeball land, somewhere to the north. It then cuts to a new area where a Flygon and a Braviary are fighting it out, and based on the dented trees and the ladders around, I think it could be this area to the west of the ice beach. The ground there makes the most sense, though it could also be this area to the left as well in the mountains, and the trees look similar to this area down here, though the ground and terrain is different. We get another shot of the icy beach area as well as a Wailmer and a Meowstic battle. Now comes the fun part. We cut to a Lucario and a Tyranitar battling on what looks like a football pitch. This could be either from a gym in the region, as there are stadiums across the region map, or this could be the game's Battle Royale / contest side game. I'm not really sure at the moment, though it's clear that this battle is quite the spectacle for the spectators. We then get a shot of the player character looking at a Munchlax while inside somebody's house. This, I feel, is either the player's house or the rival's house. The painting above the fireplace has a silhouette that reminds me of Xerneas, but most importantly, there's a cup of tea on the table. If you're living in a British-inspired region, it's tea or die. Next up, there's a shot of a pretty ice town, though I can't seem to find the location on the region map. It could be this place, but you can't really see a fountain that matches the one in the footage. Though, the building that looks like a museum in the back does match the region's picture, so it probably is this city. We can see various flags set up and a stall for food in the right of the screen as well. We then cut to this ore-filled cave, where it seems we're following an old minecart track into the depths of this cavern. My guess is that this is the cave we used to get from Manchester to Stonehenge, or a cave that's discoverable here in this northern area due to the colours above this cave's entrance seemingly being like the ore you can find inside. Either way, I feel this cave might be an early location that you discover. The next shot is of weird crop-like designs etched onto a hill in the Stonehenge City, definitely somewhere of note, and this could possibly relate to one of the legendary Pokemon of the game. Notice how the main silhouette has a tail and seems spiky and can seemingly breathe what looks like electric bolts? What if this changes depending on the game you pick? So the legendary on the box maybe is the one that shows up in this crop field. Either way, we know that this is Stonehenge as we can see it on the region's map. We then get shots of the snowy city, cavern glittering with jewels, then a large room filled with books, a computer setup, some flowers being monitored, glass windows, and the like. Chances are this is the Pokemon lab of our yet unknown professor. We then cut outside to the lakeside mansion, before following our trainer as he goes to step onto what looks like the football field from before when we saw the Lucario fighting the Tyranitar. He's wearing what can only be described as sports clothes, but he has a logo that we saw outside of the grass stadium on his arm. Perhaps the gym challenges in this region are watched by spectators like a sport, which would make a massive change from certain past games. I'm 90% sure this is the grass stadium though, as on the wall here, you can see what seems like a leaf symbol, and the green is highly accentuated on this pitch. Also, for fun fact, our number is 227. So that's all for the gameplay trailer. However, we got given a generous map of the region, which I just have to look over once more for any interesting details. So down at the bottom, we've covered this map intensely, so I'll spare you any more details, but on the purple roofed house in the first town, I noticed this large glass-like structure, which could match with the professor's research room. It's a toss-up as to whether this is the professor's lab, or if it's that building in Manchester City though. The train from this first town seems to lead to the spot across the mountain, with the lake and wetlands being the next explorable location. There's a half-broken tower to the northwest, which could be a mini-dungeon or explorable location. Perhaps this region's evil team will want something from there. There's also the question of what that large bridge to the very west is. It seemingly has no destination to the south, so where could it go? Continuing north, we have the Manchester City with its many exits, with one exit to the left being towards the cave and past a building that looks like a farm, possibly a daycare. To the right of Manchester, you can walk to the north of the region via a valley, which will take you to even more northern locations. It's also worth noting that there's a cave to the east of Manchester with no clear exit as of yet. There's a chance that this city could also have a gym that we cannot see, which would probably be the steel type to go with the steampunk vibe. This is possibly confirmed, as when one of the presenters is giving a discussion about the game, the background shows Manchester City but with the logo on one of the buildings that the assumed gyms supposedly have. Moving up further, we see two towns, Stonehenge, which we've covered extensively in this analysis, as well as a road leading to the right to a new town. There's also an unknown building in between, which could be anything honestly. The town by the ocean seems to be home to a water stadium, possibly this game's water gym. It's a port town with a lighthouse that has to hold some significance, though what that is, I don't know. Taking the path north, there's an area with some ruined trees and a stone slab, which ends off at a large dragon opening which leads into a new large city that's themed after a massive medieval castle. If there's a gym here, you can bet based on that door it'll be a dragon. There's also a large tower location, which could be the gym, or this region's Pokemon Tower. The large area in the center of the city could be a governmental location, and there's so much to see here that I'm excited to see it in-game and find out what it is. It's worth noting that this city connects to various locations though, and might act as the second hub of the game after the Manchester City. From the left, you can head to the Rocky Mountains, where we can see what is either a fighting or rock-type gym. Beyond this western-looking town is a weird, colourful location that I assume connects to the town behind the mountain via a cave of some sort. The town behind is surrounded by giant mushrooms, which makes me think we'll either get a bug or poison-type gym there, with poison being more likely due to the purple colouring. To the right of the Dragon City, there's two different paths. The lower path heads to a rather odd-looking town that reminds me of the show Balamori. Whether it has a gym or not, I'm unsure, but I feel it might serve plot significance in some way. To the north of that is the icy area we saw throughout the trailer, leading to what I assume is the Ice City. The other path from the Dragon City also leads there, though it goes through what looks like a rocky area instead. We can see another stadium in the Ice City at the very back, meaning this is probably the Ice Gym. After all this, there are two locations of note before we get to the last part of the region. Firstly, a train station that takes players to the icy north, though where it starts, I have no clue. The other is this crater in the mountains. Could this be a legendary Pokemon location in the post-game? And lastly, there's the London City itself. The London Eye, Buckingham Palace-style roads, the skyscrapers. This is probably the final city of the game, though whether this is where the Pokemon League is or whether the League awaits somewhere else, I'm not sure. There is a bright red stadium that could potentially be the Pokemon League here, as well as various other buildings like the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben, and a massive needle in the center of the city which could be an important plot location. And that's all I can glean from this direct. Did I get any information incorrect, or did you notice some things I didn't? please let me know in the comments below. I am really excited for Generation 8. And while some may not like how the graphics don't seem that crazily different from Let's Go, or some may wish the series could innovate further, just keep in mind that we haven't seen everything from this game yet, and they could very well be holding out on us. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Stay subscribed for updates on Pokemon Sword, Pokemon Shield, and future content from Nintendo. Goodbye.